The thing with Walter Anderson, his whole vision was for, this awareness of people of their own inherent and innate creativity and to make and create. And so the web and network of coastal artists, there's no competition there, of course. It's all this ecology of creativity and imagination. And so as the museum, that was the founding impetus. There was actually a great quote, and this was by Walter's wife, around the founding of the museum, that a museum without education is a place of death. And Walter Anderson also talked about nature being this perpetual fountain of youth, that it likes to surprise and innovate and recirculate, because everything is about our environment. We are where we live, where we decide to raise our families, and what we eat. All those things come from the land. And so we're really having fun exploring all those opportunities and just creating new programs, new spaces, and new friends along the way.
Welcome back to another episode of Bottled Up. I'm your host, Andrew Allen, and today we're diving deep into the heart of coastal Mississippi with a focus on the vibrant creative community surrounding the Walter Anderson Museum of Art. In this episode, we're thrilled to have Julian Rankin, the executive director of the museum. He shares his knowledge of the life and importance of local artist and legend Walter Anderson. And Julian gives us a behind-the-scenes look inside the very popular Walter Anderson Museum of Art that continues to spotlight the Mississippi Gulf Coast's culture, life, and uniqueness. Plus, we'll get a sneak peek into exciting future plans, events, and the development of new community spaces, ensuring that Walter Anderson's legacy continues to inspire and engage. So pop open a Pepsi, folks, and stay tuned for a fun and inspirational conversation you don't want to miss. Welcome to Bottled Up. This morning we have the executive director for the Walter Anderson Museum of Art, Mr. Julian Rankin. Julian, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Julian, how long have you been with WAMA?
So it's been 6 years now. I started in late 2018, in fall of 2018, and came from Jackson at the Mississippi Museum of Art, where I'd been there for some time, and really just dove into this amazing place that is the coast, of course, but also the museum and what it means to the community. And we've had a great time and a great ride, a lot of momentum and wonderful programming and learning and education and community happening. So it's been a great move for me, and we've put down roots here.
That's great, Julian. So you've been on the coast since 2018. So what so far has been your hardest adjustment and your most favorite thing about moving down to the coast?
Well, I'm from Mississippi, but it is, and I've of course been to the coast before, but there is a south of I-10 and, connection to New Orleans and Mobile, this different place that is coastal Mississippi. It's a little bit a place apart, which is one of the things I love about it. And then of course, getting to know new communities, that's always a challenge, but this community is amazing, but also the cities are so different, and the industries and the economies and the histories. And so it's been really fun to collaborate with not just partners and folks individually, but also municipalities and career tech high school academies and others to do interesting projects and programs that are really place-based, which is what Walter Anderson was about taking action and thinking creatively in one's own backyard. And so that's been the most challenging in a good way, but also fun and rewarding aspects.
Well, I mean, I think that when it comes to Walter Anderson, the fact that we live in the area that he lived in and created in is a special thing in itself. And just how prolific he was with the amount of art and pieces that he came out with. I mean, it's kind of incredible to think about all that he's done. 'Cause I mean, literally, if you look at all the prints that he did, all the block prints, all the watercolors, everything that he did, how long, to give the listener a little bit of history about Walter Anderson, what was the timeline that he lived in and the timeline that he created all this art in?
So Walter Anderson was born in 1903, and he was born in New Orleans, and he died in 1965. So just to give you the span of his life, he died at the age of 62. So he moved here to coastal Mississippi with his family. They bought property here. His mother, actually, who was an artist herself and raised not just Walter Anderson, but two other sons, Peter, the oldest son, and Mac Anderson, the youngest. And they were all artists. And so they moved over here. And Peter Anderson, Walter's older brother, started Shearwater Pottery, which was started in 1928. And so they moved over here when they were younger men. their mother bought the land in 1918. And so 10 years later, Peter Anderson starts Shearwater Pottery, making, again, pottery and ceramics. Walter works there. The whole family works there. That pottery is now nearly 100 years old, and it's one of the most celebrated of its kind in the South. And then meanwhile, Walter Anderson he went to art school in Pennsylvania and then New York, and then came back to Mississippi and was fascinated just with nature. Had always been sailing and began making work. Really, he made work from the day he could make work, even as a young person. We have a great piece in the museum. It's a wooden chest that he carved for his father, his dad was a businessman who was not an artist. And it was carved with figures and animals from the Jungle Book, his father's favorite book. And it was a way for Walter Anderson to convince his father that art had pragmatism and he wanted to go to art school. But Walter came back and he began this just lifetime of creativity. And, he's most known. Well, he's known for several things. Some people know him best for his block prints. So in the 1940s, he began making large scale linoleum block prints, carving out essentially large stamps out of big pieces of linoleum that he would get from the shipbuilding industry, and then print these fairy tales, all these designs he did, fairy tales, myths and legends, coastal flora and fauna, onto big pieces of discontinued wallpaper on the backsides of wallpaper, and sell these tapestries. And that made him famous. And he had a show at the Brooklyn Museum in New York in 1949 from those. But he was also going out to the islands, Horn Island being his favorite place, and making work out on the islands. And these were more for his own exploration. He really felt that this place, Ocean Springs, the coast, the Gulf South, had this magic and mystery to it, akin to the greatest epic fairy tales that humans have ever told, which Walter Anderson also loved to read. And so he thought of himself in this grand arc of history, but really wanted to put roots and his time down here, and lived on the islands for days and weeks at a time under his upturned boat that he rowed out there just so he could paint nature and live in nature and get this mystical cosmic connection to creation. And he made murals and really defined, even during his lifetime, some of the character of the town of Ocean Springs, along with his family at Shearwater and all the other artists who were making here. Then after he died, the family discovered more of his work, the watercolors he'd been making on the islands. No one really knew about them. And so they unlocked more of the story. And from there, in the late 60s into the 70s and 80s, people were fundraising and organizing to create a museum. And then this museum was built in 1991.
That was going to be
one
my
of the things
next
that
question.
you come here, just to kind of put a cap on it, is you'll see like the Ocean Springs Community Center, which was built in 1950, that Walter Anderson painted. And these are 3,000 square feet of murals, sometimes called the Sistine Chapel of Mississippi. So the museum's attached to that building. So, 40 years later, after he painted those murals for the town as a gift to the community, a museum sprung up after his death.
I mean, I know, being from where I'm from, and I know that a lot of other people that I know who enjoy the local art. I mean, he's the gold standard when it comes to local artists, and just how unique his designs are. I mean, I'm literally looking at one in my office right now, a pelican that he did that's framed, and it's just, his art represents, in my opinion, kind of represents who we are as a community. And it kind of, it supersedes and kind of expands on our local area. And the fact that, I mean, every artist is a little bit of an eccentric, right? But he kind of took it to the next level, going out on the islands and living out there for days and days on time. And then he would just sail back with all this work that you were talking about and you described earlier. It's just, I think, in my opinion, I'm a big fan of Stig as well, but Walter Anderson is a very, I remember one of the first gifts that my mom gave me when I was a kid. It was the alligator print from Walter Anderson. And I remember I'll be laying in bed trying to go to sleep, and it was framed over my bed, and I'll just be looking at it the whole time. And so I've grown up looking at his works and his art, and it's just a really, really special thing to be able to have that in your community. And I imagine you feel the same way working over at the Museum of Art. So my next question is, so it's been the museum has been open since 1991. How has it expanded since then, since that time period? And what does that look like now? If a visitor was to come and check out the museum, how kind of describe that?
Sure, absolutely. It's changed a lot. And I think what you were saying a minute ago is important too. We're talking about Stig Markussen, another great artist here on the coast, contemporary artist working now. And the thing with Walter Anderson and really anybody who comes before us, but especially Walter Anderson, his whole vision was for, this awareness of people of their own inherent and innate creativity and to make and create. And so the web and network of coastal artists, there's no competition there. Of course, it's all this ecology of creativity and imagination. And so we have figures like Walter Anderson, who is an epic figure, and he wanted to kind of build this myth of himself during his life. He was not understood, and he was outcast by even his family and children. They didn't understand what their father was and what he was up to. But to come back to that, he really wanted to suffuse that across the community. And so as the museum, that was the founding impetus. There was actually a great quote, and this was by Walter's wife, Agnes Grinstead Anderson. Sissy was what she went by, and she talked about this around the founding of the museum, that a museum without education is a place of death. And Walter Anderson also talked about nature being this perpetual fountain of youth, that it likes to surprise and innovate and recirculate. And so the museum, from its founding beginnings, was about education and discussion and interpretation. So now 30 plus years later, we're taking what Walter Anderson started, this idea of education and collaboration, like I was saying, with other contemporary artists, and this rejuvenating, endless wellspring of creative output. And so when we show contemporary work here, if you come in the museum today, and not to say they didn't always show contemporary art, but you'll see a lot of contemporary art, public art outside. There's been expansions throughout the years. If you came in 1991, for example, we didn't have a big lobby edition that was added in 2012. There's things like that. But really the last 6 years since we've been doing what we're doing here, we've launched 2 new campus expansions. So right now there's a restaurant and coffee shop and public green space being built right behind the museum and contiguous with the campus. That'll be called the Traveler. And this will be like I said, a coffee shop during the day, but also breakfast, lunch with a celebrity chef who's coming in, a contemporary art exhibition around you in that space. And it's an old renovated 100-year-old home that's populated with new ideas and new art and new community, opportunities and members. So there's that happening. We're doing a lot to grow not just what our campus looks like, but how you see us in the community. So I think the biggest thing, if you come here, the museum looks wonderful. There's amazing art. The exhibitions are curated by our team so beautifully. And there's a lot of really cool ideas that are connecting. So we talk about foodways and aquaculture, and this notion of Biloxi as the seafood capital of the world, and the cultural fusion that economy that's birthed of the sea has cast in Biloxi. But also we talk about marine education and science, and how art and communication can raise awareness about environmental issues or do environmental filmmaking projects. And so our things that are creative programs and opportunities for people stem out from what Walter Anderson was doing, which was exploration, inquiry. He was a naturalist as well. He was a poet. He was so many things. And so we can connect to a lot of our partners who work across sector. And so I think you'll feel that energy when you come into the museum. We just did a wonderful new audio guide that has dramatic readings. It has interviews.
Oh, that's really neat, Jules. I'm a big fan. I'm a really big fan of those, because it kind of elevates the experience to another level whenever you go into a space like you're describing.
Yeah, so it's great. I mean, people have been enjoying that, and we partnered with an immersive theater troupe out of New Orleans who typically does theater where, if you've ever been to any of these, you'll be in the same like historic house or interactive space where the actors are performing around you and you're just walking through like a ghost. So they do this immersive theater as their primary work, but they did this dramatic audio guide as well. So it has that character to it. So there's just fun things happening. And I think it all goes back, like you were saying, to the place where we reside. And it's not all about nature, but it is, because everything is about our environment. We are where we live, where we decide to raise our families, and what we eat. All those things come from the land. And so we're really having fun exploring all those opportunities, and just creating new programs, new spaces, and new friends along the way.
Has there been any discussion, and I know that you would know more than anyone, those immersive experiences that they'll do, like a 4D experience where you'll go in and like they normally do them for only a certain amount of time, but they'll set up like a Van Gogh experience where you walk in and the walls are all like turning and looking like a live version of a painting. Has there been anything like that, talking about maybe possibly in the future doing that with Walter's work?
Yeah, actually, we have been experimenting in that space as well. We have what I would say the closest to it, which is not exactly that, but is our light festival that we do every year. So it's called Silent Light. And in that case, and we started this during COVID when there were, of course, restrictions on indoor
Yes.
gathering. We projected and projection mapped the outside facades of the museum and the Ocean Springs Community Center with animated projections of the murals and the block prints. And this began what's now a 4-year long, this is the 4th annual this year, December Light Festival, where we project, again, all those animations. And then we have silent disco and performances, live performances from bands to those projected light shows and other art installations and performers. So that's been what we've been really excited about, and thinking too about how we could travel that, like you're saying, take over a warehouse and create structures and do, because that is what they're doing in those spaces. Those are projection
they're really. I think we went to the Monet one that they had in New Orleans for a few months, and it's really incredible how you can utilize technology to kind of fully immerse yourself in a situation like that. So I think that his work would be great to maybe one day have that be a special, maybe a special exhibit or something like that for like the summer when the kids are out of school or something.
Totally. I think that'd be wonderful.
So during Katrina, I was speaking with somebody, and they were telling me that the hurricane was with the rushing waters that came in. A lot of the work in the vault was swept away, and they were looking for it. Do you have any information on the history of that occurrence?
Sure. So obviously I wasn't here, and I did come down after Katrina. I was living in North Carolina at the time, but my mother was doing some work afterwards in Bay St. Louis and Pass Christian. So I saw it, even though I'd moved away from Mississippi at that moment. But I was just a young person. But hearing the stories of what happened here, the museum was actually protected. So Ocean Springs, the topography of this community is, and the museum specific locations, a little bit on this hill that of course goes down to the Sound. And, part of our topography is why the French were here with their fort for a time, when they were moving towards New Orleans, their ultimate capital, in this area, because of it's somewhat protected. So the museum was actually okay. The family, though, at Shearwater, where they have their own vault, that vault was breached. And so that's where a lot of the work, and of course, Shearwater itself, all the pottery, things, but the vault itself was also breached. And that's where you'll see a lot of the watercolors and works on paper were actually damaged. Some things were lost. But we have a show up now, an exhibit of Alice in Wonderland illustrations that Walter Anderson did, because he would also illustrate, of course, these Western classics and global myths and legends in his spare time. But these line drawings are so beautiful, but some of them were some of the ones damaged in Katrina. So you'll see these were some of the fortunate ones that are still salvageable, and they're kind of cool because you just see the experience they had. But other things were lost, and they were fishing out artifacts and pottery from the bayou and the mud.
Yeah.
And so that was the experience of the family, and the museum was triage mode and helped air out things in the community center, block prints and things that mostly got damaged over there because they're right on the inner harbor.
Oh yeah, they're literally on the harbor. I always go over, anytime I have an anniversary gift or a birthday present I need to get from my mom or my wife, I normally go over to Shearwater and pick something up over there. So I know exactly where you're talking about. As far as all of the pieces that you'll have at the museum, what would be like the crown jewel? What would be the most prized piece out of all that you would consider to be the most valuable?
Sure. Well, I mean, there's a couple ways to think about it, and I think it's in museums. There's some questions that museum goers ask that sometimes museums don't always talk about, which I've done some programming in the past thinking about this whole thing. For example, people want to know the fun stuff, like what's the most valuable work in here? What would I steal if I could take one piece?
Yeah. Let's look at it from let's look at it from the lens of if I was to steal something.
Yeah, exactly.
What would be the best thing to take?
Right. Well, I think so that if you were going to steal something, of course, we don't advocate for that, but it is a good way to engage with the museum world, right? So if you're going to steal, this thought exercise, not actually stealing.
Absolutely.
But this idea of what would you steal? Well, the most valuable work you couldn't steal because it's the largest work. So this is published information, but the Ocean Springs Community Center, which is owned by the city, Anderson painted this in the 50s, like I mentioned, for the sum of $1, a check he never cashed. It was a gift to the city, but it was valued or priced out at the beginning at $1, it's now worth more than $30 million.
Yeah. And I
Praise
know
that.
exactly what mural you're talking about. Anybody who's went to elementary school on the coast took a field trip over there and has
That's
seen
exactly.
seen
Yeah.
exactly what you're describing.
Yeah, so there's that. I mean, there's that kind of value. The watercolors, just in terms of like rarity, because the watercolors, people don't always understand this. So the watercolors that were made on Horn Island, not just on Horn Island, but the if you were to find a watercolor from Horn Island, an image that he made on there, that's of course one of a kind. It's not reproducible. There's many of his block prints out there. Those were designed to be reproduced. So automatically you talk about rarity and of course value and so forth. So watercolors are just those are his most intimate imagery because they are just one sheet. But then there's just so many cool other things that have just value in terms of the story. I mean, he made so many objects, made puppets for his kids that articulated. So if I could have like one thing in my house, would it be that? Would it be the oil painting of Horn Island that, there's a painting in the museum that really gives the character to the surreal color at sunset on Horn Island and how much transports you there. So it's, but I think the thing to take from it is hopefully what people take from coming to the museum is just some energy that, this place feels like it's got some spirituality to it.
Absolutely.
That's really what Walter Anderson tapped into was like, we're all here, we're all together. The nature is producing magic around us at all times. Let's take some moments to look away from the 9 to 5 or the circuitry of modern
Cell
life.
phones.
Phone. Yeah, just take a little exploration and adventure and remember, how amazing it is that we're all even here, doing what we can do. What we're doing.
I wanted to ask you, Julian, about the block prints. So realizations, how is their connection? Is there a connection between realizations and the museum? Like how does that work?
It's all separate. So the museum is a private nonprofit that, of course, the family has been involved in from the beginning. They're part of the Friends of Walter Anderson group that advocated for its founding. They've been involved, but they're really they're our closest partners in that way. But there's no official involvement. So the Anderson family, there's the Shearwater pottery side of things. That's their own, of course, family business. But likewise, Realizations, which sells the officially licensed prints that are now screen printed instead of block printed to make them more sustainable. The block prints, that Anderson carved in the 40s wore away over time because of heat and cold and so forth. So that's the family's enterprise on that side of things. So both of them are completely separate. The museum gets no direct revenue; they get no direct revenue from us, but we all support one another. And
absolutely. So,
yeah.
Could you give me a little bit of insight? I've always wondered this because anybody who visits Realizations and can purchase, postcard prints, they can purchase, actual recreated hand painted prints by local artists. How do they recruit or find which artist is going to do which print? Because you can tell that if you go on their website, there'll be 15 different versions of the same print and they're all painted differently by different local artists. How do they find those artists?
I don't know exactly. I mean, I think they probably have, they know a lot of the people and been working with individuals here for a while, but I'm sure it's, probably pretty organic. Someone probably reaches out and says, I'd love to paint these. They could apply in that sense. I bet there's just people who've been doing it for decades. There's certainly family members who do. And I would imagine you could request, if you wanted a particular artist to do a print. But yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't actually know. I will say that back to the kind of the way it all works. The one thing the family has always done, and back to the value of art, they've given so much art to the museum, of course, and they allow us to borrow things that they own. But that was really the only reason the museum exists, is because the family gave their greatest asset, which was the work that their family made to fund this place. Because I do think people think that the Andersons, and certainly there was early on, the family in New Orleans, they were a well off family, but the Depression wreaked havoc on everyone, and so even like today, these are all working artists. They work in this creative economy. This is how they participate in it, the same way their family did before. And so I love that it's not like there's endless money flow into art and culture anywhere, especially not in Mississippi, but there's people doing the work to create what you're saying, which is the experiences on the wall of your office or in your nursery of your child who has an opossum block print like I did as a kid from the Alphabet series or what have you.
There's been a lot of Walter Anderson nurseries made on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. I can guarantee it.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about fundraising mechanisms and events that you guys have at the museum and how people in the community can get involved to support such a wonderful place that you have the luxury of being the executive director over. So, how many events do you guys have annually?
So, I mean, if you talk, there's so many events and programs, they're near constant. But talking about like public events, festivals, parties, gatherings, and things like that. I mean, there's probably half a dozen or a dozen things of various sizes that are more of that variety. But we have programming literally every week of all varieties out in the community and here. But one of the big ones that we've got, in terms of kind of fundraisers and parties that I mentioned earlier, is Silent Light, and so that is December 6th and 7th. It's actually a 2-day weekend this time for this light festival. And so it's a Friday night gala and a Saturday night public festival. So traditionally we've been doing more of the public light festival. So we're going to keep that, which is where the streets get blocked off, silent disco, all those fun projections I was talking about earlier and other performances. But the night before, we're going to do a gala, and this is all themed around Wonderland Illuminated, because like I mentioned, Alice in Wonderland, which was illustrated by Walter Anderson, is now up, and we also just got the book back in print with University Press of Mississippi, so you can now get the book again. So we're theming all that around that publication. But I would encourage people who want to support the museum. You can come out to the free Saturday night festival, and you can rent headphones as well if you want to do the silent disco. But there's free to enjoy, or if you want to support as a ticket buyer to the gala, there'll be more access that night, more fun things going on. We're going to showcase the Traveler that I mentioned, the first night that people will be allowed inside the Traveler. It won't be 100% complete with the landscape, but they'll see the first glimpse of this new restaurant that's coming to the museum. So Silent Light, that's what I would mark y'all's calendars for. But there's always something happening. We have fundraisers, but in the winter and also in the spring, and workshops and classes and free things and ticketed things and concerts all throughout the year.
That's great. That's great, Julian. So what's the date that cafe and a new area is going to be open to the public?
So, we're looking at, realistically and ideally to really experience it, it's going to be Q1 of 25. There's
Cool.
The landscape is really what's going to be the later thing, and some of our public art commissions. The building itself should be done, almost complete, like I said, in next month or so, because it will be open for Silent Light. But then we'll go back to the construction side and finish up landscape and going into the springs. What I can expect and what we'll be doing is ribbon cuttings in the new year, followed by a full spring of inaugural programs, because there is a huge landscape portion to this as well. There's a performance stage outside and so forth. So Flower Fest is one of the events.
When is Flower Fest, Julian?
That's in the spring. So we usually do it around Earth Day. We haven't set the date for it in 25, but it'll be a Saturday around Earth Day. And we've done it 2 years, went from 500 people to 2,000 people, and we haven't even had really the facilities to support it yet. So we'll now have that, and it'll be a great vendors, and we'll have plantings on site. People can make their own bouquets. Just a lot of fun.
That's really
energy.
neat. That's really, really neat, man. So let me ask you a question about Peter Anderson Festival. For anyone on the coast, they know what Peter Anderson is, but how does the museum tie in, or do y'all tie in anything with Peter Anderson?
For the Peter Anderson, Arts and Crafts Festival, we're again just partners and supporters. We're not officially involved in the festival. It's run by the chamber, and of course partnering, the city, and including encompassing the city and all these other vendors and merchants and museum and everyone else to have 100,000 people come to town. But the chamber runs that. We set up and do a booth outside, but also open the museum doors. So it's a big day for us because we are right along, Washington Avenue, where
you're in the thick of it, Julian.
Yeah, it's a busy weekend, and we love it, of course. But we're fortunate to not have to manage all the volunteers and the logistics. So we're appreciative of the chamber for.
Are y'all going to think about, whenever you have that stage venue opening up, are you going to have some people playing music at the museum?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, I think, not only at those kind of events, but it'll be a regular occurrence, and that'll be really wonderful. The other thing about what we're doing here is we have this restaurant coming to the back across the street from the museum, where we have our education building, existing education building. There'll be a new one behind it on this 300-foot deep lot, this really long football field deep lot. A new education building, 5,000 square feet of new construction that's coming next year. And so ultimately, we have all this, 3 properties of the museum campus, and also the Springs Hotel, which is right next to us, which opened last year. So this is right at the south end of the Ocean Springs Arts and Entertainment District, and we're really going to brand this place as the Art Block. here's this block of you can stay here, you can eat breakfast here, you can go to a concert here, see a museum experience here, take an art class here. And that's what we're trying to build for the museum. And that speaks to what I was saying earlier, where it's about activating the creative energy more than it is about just having the artwork, preserved. It's
Yeah,
about
y'all really
having.
do have your finger on the pulse of what it is y'all need to do down there, man. Because that everything that you're talking about fits right in with not only Walter Anderson's vision of what he wanted people to think about his art and to feel about the area, but like you guys are creating a space that basically invokes all of that. So I commend y'all on. It's really a testament to you guys of the planning that you guys have put in place for that. Because I think that you're going to have everything you need right there.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And I think it goes back to that analogy and metaphor of an ecosystem, which is a fun way to think about it. We're all the economies and certainly the creative economy. Next to us at the Springs, for example, there's Palmette, which is a flower shop and gallery that's nested inside that private enterprise, and it's working artists who are right here next to the museum. So we're participating in that as well, and having a restaurateur coming in, other artists who are making work. So it's fun to see it happen in real time, because that's how communities change and grow. And you want to retain that authenticity of the place. And the coast, and certainly Ocean Springs, has a quality, a narrative around it, a reason people come here, want to live here, grow up here, but also visit here. And so you have to retain that cultural integrity in order to not lose the thread on that in the future. And so I think it's really important and exciting for all of the participants, in this process.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I'm excited to see what you guys do in the next 5 years, Julian, because the next year, it sounds like you're going to have a lot more things to do at the museum than you did 2-3 years ago, and I know that we partnered with you guys a little bit after COVID, and COVID kind of put a damper on everyone's business. But I mean, when it comes to a museum space where you depend upon people visiting and they're in close quarters with one another, I know that you guys were in part of that area of people that were struggling to get visitors to come in. Any kind of visitor center, or discovery center, anything like that, you had to come up with really creative ways to continue to open the doors and share all this stuff with everyone. And so I'm glad that we were able to be partners with you guys.
No, we appreciate working with y'all. It's been great. I mean, you think about all these, in any good festival, any good gathering, having, the beverage partners and the support, you really need that, especially as a nonprofit. But you could just imagine, it's part of the puzzle when you're trying to do anything, is having, obviously the corporate sector, but certainly food and beverage and what you all do to help make a good time happen. We couldn't do it without you.
Absolutely. Well, Julian, thank you so much, man, for the time. If someone wanted to come visit the museum, where would they go to either get tickets, or how could they find you guys?
Sure. Well, if you're walking around Ocean Springs, we're just downtown on Washington Avenue, of course, a couple blocks from the Sound and a few blocks from the center of downtown. But WalterAndersonMuseum.org is the place to start. We're easy to find, and we'll be here when you get here. And we're open 7 days a week. We open a little later on some of those days just because we never close our doors in terms of days of the week. And so anytime you're in town, though, we're here, and we think it's a great way for people to get introduced or reintroduced to this beautiful place that we call the coast.
Absolutely, Julian. Well, thanks so much for your time, man. I know you're busy. Walter Anderson is probably my favorite artist, whether he's local or not. I've always had an affinity for his work. You can walk around my house and see that. I almost think I overdo it a little bit with his work, just because of the level of access that I have to the prints from Realization or anything like that, So it's been a fun time having this chat with you and going down memory lane about Walter Anderson and just how prolific and incredible his art is. So I appreciate the time, Julian. If there's anything that y'all need from us, you don't hesitate to ask. We're always here to help you out.
Thank y'all so much, and it was a pleasure being with you.
And that wraps up another incredible episode of Bottled Up, diving into the creative heart of our Mississippi coastal home with Julian Rankin, Executive Director of the Walter Anderson Museum of Art, and what is needed to sustain and grow a cultural and art institution that is essential in fostering a vibrant local art and cultural scene, and an all-important popular tourist destination. The Walter Anderson Museum not only preserves history, but also shares Walter Anderson's legacy, from enchanting illustrations to rare watercolors, which continues to inspire and connect our community. Remember, Art is a vital part of our coastal collective identity and life, so don't miss the chance to visit the Walter Anderson Museum of Art in downtown Ocean Springs, open 7 days a week. Thanks to Julian Rankin of the Walter Anderson Museum for giving us his time today, and a big thank you to all of you, our listeners, for tuning in. At Bottled Up, we're all about uncorking the stories that shape our coastal home. And remember to always support our local businesses, restaurants, museums, and attractions. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the Bottled Up podcast. Want us to deliver this show to your email inbox as they drop? Want to tell us about how you like the show? Or do you want to tell us about a Gulf Coast business or restaurant that you'd like for us to spotlight in any upcoming episodes? Email Morgan Wheeler at mwheeler, MWHEELER at abevinc.com. That's ABEVINC.com. Want to know more about Allen Beverages and how we work with our clients, partners, and vendors? Check out allenbeverages.com. This show was edited and produced by Johnny Gwynn and Deep Fried Studios.